My wife cheated on me with her lawyer, and now he's claiming half our $2 million house and $300, $0 in savings while they conspired to hide millions in offshore accounts. How did I go from believing she loved me to losing everything? I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how I went from believing my wife, Lisa, loved me to losing everything. Our house, our savings, and apparently even more. It all started with a gut feeling. At first, I just thought she was stressed or busy, but then little things began to add up. She'd be secretive with her phone, deleting texts, locking her screen when I walked into the room. I'd catch her sneaking out late at night, always claiming she was working late or meeting up with a friend. Yeah, right. What really pushed me over the edge was the day I found her phone open on the kitchen table. I saw a message thread with a guy named Mark, her lawyer, I later found out. The messages weren't just professional, they were flirty, intimate even. There were plans to meet up, talk about legal stuff, but I knew better. Her tone was different with him, more playful, more daring. I saw her send a picture of herself in a skimpy top, saying, "Can't wait to see you tonight." That's when I realized she'd been lying to my face for months. I felt my stomach drop and my mind started racing. How long had this been going on? Was I just blind or did I ignore the signs? I had trusted her, built my whole life around her. We bought that big house in the suburbs, a $2 million mansion that I worked hard to pay for. We had savings, about $300, $0 I kept in our joint account. We were supposed to be set for life, or so I thought. Turns out she and her lawyer, Mark, had been planning something else entirely. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I started digging. I hired a private investigator just to confirm what I already suspected. The guy followed her for a week, and sure enough, she was sneaking out late, meeting Mark at fancy hotels, even going on weekend trips. I found out she'd been lying to me about her meetings, her trips, everything. She told me she was working late at the office, that she was stressed, that I was overreacting. But the proof was right there, hidden in plain sight. When I finally brought her home one night and laid everything out, her reaction was a mix of anger, denial, and outright lies. She said she was just having an emotional affair, that it didn't mean anything, that she loved me but needed something else. She even had the nerve to call me paranoid, stupid, and threatened to leave if I kept pushing her about Mark. I was furious. How could she lie so easily? How could she betray me like this after everything? And the worst part, she kept insisting that she deserved better, that she was stuck in this marriage, but never really saying she wanted to fix things. That night, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I'd always been the stable, dependable guy, worked my ass off building that house, saving every dollar. And now I was staring at the woman I loved, lying and cheating behind my back with her lawyer, no less. The guy who's supposed to be protecting her legally is now screwing her behind my back. That's when I realized the betrayal went way deeper than I thought. It wasn't just about the affair. They'd been conspiring to hide millions in offshore accounts, hiding money from me, from us. And I knew I had to do something. But I wasn't just going to let her walk away with everything. No way. I started planning my revenge the very next day. I knew I couldn't trust her anymore, and I knew Mark was in it up to his neck. I had to fight back, to take what was mine and make sure they paid for this betrayal. That's where I am now, trying to figure out how to turn this chaos into some kind of justice. After I confronted Lisa that night, everything changed. She sat there, furious, crying, throwing around accusations that I was paranoid or jealous. She told me I was overreacting, that Mark was just a friend, that I was twisting things. But I knew better. I had the proof now, and I wasn't about to let her dismiss it. I told her I was done playing her games, and that I was going to find out exactly how deep this went. The next few days felt like living in a nightmare. I started digging into her emails, her bank accounts, anything I could get my hands on. I needed to know how much she'd hidden, how far this thing went. That's when I stumbled across the offshore accounts, accounts she'd hidden in the names of shell companies, in places I'd never even heard of. They had millions stashed away, way more than I'd ever imagined. I couldn't believe she'd been planning this all along, hiding money from me, from our future. I realized that Mark wasn't just her lawyer, he was part of the scheme. They'd been working together probably for months, maybe longer. I found emails where she was telling him how she wanted to secure her future without me knowing. Mark had been advising her on how to hide assets, how to set up offshore accounts, how to make it look like she had nothing to hide. It was a full-blown conspiracy and I was just discovering it. I felt sick. How could she do this? How could she betray me like this after all the years we'd been together? I'd always believed she loved me, that we were building a life together. Turns out she'd been planning her escape for a while, and I was just a pawn in her game. I started to see her for what she really was, manipulative, selfish, and willing to destroy everything we had for her own gain. I knew I had to act fast. I contacted a lawyer I found through some discreet research, someone who specialized in financial crimes and divorce. I wanted to make sure I could get a foothold before she and Mark moved the money out of reach. I also hired a private investigator to follow her, to get more evidence of her meetings with Mark and any other shady dealings. I needed to build a case, not just for the divorce, but to uncover the full extent of her treachery. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act, crying, pleading, trying to gaslight me into doubting my own instincts. She told me she was sorry, that she loved me, that she'd never cheat if I just forgave her. Yeah, right. I saw through her lies. She was a master at spinning stories, but I wasn't falling for it anymore. I knew she was planning her exit, and I was determined to stop her before she took everything. I started to realize that her betrayal wasn't just emotional or financial. It was systematic, calculated. She'd been preparing for this moment for a long time, and I had to catch up fast. I also learned that she'd been convincing her friends and even some of her family that I was crazy or controlling, trying to turn everyone against me. It was classic manipulation. She wanted to leave with her head held high, with her money, her freedom, and her new life. But I wasn't about to let her get away with it. I had the evidence and I had the plan. The game was on now, and I was ready to fight for what was mine. Every day I felt more betrayed, more angry, more determined. I knew I couldn't fix this marriage, at least not in the way I once thought possible, but I could make sure she didn't walk away with everything. I would expose her, take her to court, and make her pay for what she'd done. I wasn't just fighting for the house or the money. I was fighting to reclaim my dignity, my life, and my future. And I knew deep down this was just the beginning of a long, ugly battle. Once I had all the evidence, her secret offshore accounts, the emails, the plans she had with Mark, I realized I needed to act fast. I couldn't let her or him slip away with everything. I contacted a top-notch lawyer who specialized in high-stakes divorce and financial crimes. From that moment, I knew I had to be strategic. I wanted to freeze the assets, uncover exactly how much she'd hidden, and make sure she couldn't just walk off with a fortune. My lawyer advised me to serve her with divorce papers immediately, but I also had to prepare for the worst, her trying to hide or move money. I got a court order to freeze our joint accounts and started working with forensic accountants to trace her offshore holdings. I also hired a private investigator again, this time to follow her more discreetly. I needed to know her next move. I knew Lisa was cunning, and I wasn't about to let her slip through my fingers. She played it cool at first, acting like everything was fine, even pretending to be the innocent victim. She'd cry, say she was sorry, insist she loved me. She told me I was paranoid, that Mark was just a friend, that I was overreacting, that I was pushing her away. I saw through her tears and her lies. I knew she was trying to manipulate me into backing down, but I wasn't falling for it. I had the evidence, and I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. Meanwhile, Mark was still trying to spin his story. He'd send her sweet texts, promising her a future, and trying to convince her to run away together once she got her money. I found out he'd even been advising her on how to hide assets better, how to transfer funds to new offshore accounts, how to make everything look clean. The guy was a professional at deception, and he thought he could outsmart me. That made me even angrier. I wasn't just betrayed, I was being played. As the days went on, I uncovered more. Lisa had been funneling money through a series of shell companies, buying properties in her name in countries I'd never even heard of. She'd been planning this for years, and I had just become a part of her game. I realized I was going to need more than just legal action. I had to be aggressive. I contacted a forensic accountant who specialized in uncovering hidden assets, and together, we mapped out exactly how much money she'd been hiding away. I also learned that she'd been trying to convince her friends that I was controlling and jealous, turning them against me. She wanted an alibi, a way to justify her actions. But I knew the truth, and I was determined to expose her for who she really was. I wanted her to see that I wasn't going to let this slide. She had taken everything, our house, our savings, our future, and was planning to disappear with millions of dollars she'd hidden offshore. The emotional toll was immense. I felt betrayed, angry, humiliated. I'd worked so hard to build a life, and now I was faced with losing it all because of her greed and her affair. But I also knew I had to stay strong, focus on my legal strategy, and not let her manipulate me into giving up. I started to see that this wasn't just about money. It was about her character, her morals, and her willingness to destroy everything we had for her own gain. I kept reminding myself that I deserved better. I deserved honesty, loyalty, respect. And I was going to fight to get what was mine, legally and morally. I wasn't just fighting for the house or the savings. I was fighting for my dignity and my future. I knew this was only the beginning, but I was ready. I had a plan, I had the evidence, and I wasn't going to back down. My wife, Lisa, thought she could get away with everything, but she was about to learn that betrayal has consequences. And I was the one who was going to make sure she paid. By now, I had everything lined up: lawyers, forensic accountants, private investigators. The house, our savings, all the offshore accounts, everything was under scrutiny. I felt like I was in a war, and I knew I had to stay one step ahead of Lisa and Mark if I wanted to come out of this with some semblance of control. One night, I got a call from my lawyer. The court had just issued an emergency freeze on all our joint assets, including the house and the offshore accounts. That was a huge relief, but I knew it was only the beginning. Lisa was furious. She started throwing tantrums, claiming I was ruining her life, that I was paranoid and controlling. She told everyone I was a jealous husband who couldn't handle her success. But I knew better. I'd seen the proof. I knew she'd been planning this for years, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I decided to confront her directly. I sat her down in the living room, our big, beautiful house that I'd worked so hard to pay for, and laid out everything I'd uncovered. Her face went pale when I mentioned the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the transfers she'd made. I watched her eyes flicker with panic. She tried to deny everything, saying I was crazy, that I was making it all up. But I had the documents, the emails, the bank statements to prove it. Her reaction was classic. She started crying, begging me to believe her, saying she was just trying to secure her future, that Mark was just helping her with legal stuff. She claimed she never intended to hurt me, that she loved me. I almost laughed. That's when I realized her version of love was just manipulation. She was good at lying, but I wasn't buying it anymore. While she was trying to gaslight me, I stayed calm. I told her I knew everything. I told her I was going to take her to court and I was going to make sure she paid for what she did. I also told her I was going to expose her to everyone, her friends, her family, so they'd see her for what she really was: a liar, a cheat, a thief. That's when she snapped. She called me controlling, insecure, and then just stormed out of the house, crying and screaming that I was ruining her life. That night I sat alone in what was supposed to be our home. It felt hollow, empty. I wondered how I got here, how I went from believing she loved me to feeling like I'd lost everything. I kept replaying the moments, the secret texts, the late-night meetings, her lies. It all felt surreal. How could she betray me like this? How could she lie to my face, pretend everything was fine while planning her escape? The emotional blow hit hard. I'd been, and now I was left with nothing but questions and anger. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized I had to stay strong, to fight for what was rightfully mine. I couldn't let her or Mark walk away with a fortune while I was left picking up the pieces. I wasn't just fighting for money. I was fighting for my dignity, my respect, my future. The next day, I met with my lawyer again. We started preparing the legal case to challenge the offshore accounts, to get a full account of her hidden assets, and to make sure she couldn't just disappear with everything. I also started gathering witness statements, friends she'd tried to turn against me, colleagues she'd confided in about her plans. I knew I had to expose her fully, show everyone what she really was. I won't lie, it's been one of the hardest experiences of my life. The betrayal cuts deep, especially when it comes from the person you trusted most. But I've learned a lot. I learned that appearances can be deceiving, that greed and betrayal can hide behind a pretty face. And I learned that if you want justice, you have to fight for it even when everything seems lost. I'm still in the thick of it, but I refuse to let her win. She thought she could destroy me, but I'm determined to rebuild, stronger, smarter, and more aware of what real betrayal looks like. The legal battle was now in full swing. I knew Lisa was doing everything she could to hide her tracks, but I had my team of investigators and forensic experts digging deeper every day. We uncovered more shell companies, more offshore accounts, and even some fake identities she'd set up to transfer money. The scope was staggering. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was orchestrating a full-scale financial escape plan. I remember sitting in the lawyer's office, looking at the mountain of evidence, feeling a mix of rage and disbelief. How could she have lied so effortlessly for years? How could she have built this entire facade of a perfect life, only to turn around and betray me like this? The house, the savings, the future I thought we had, it was all slipping away, and she was doing her best to take it with her. Meanwhile, Mark kept pushing her to go further. I intercepted some messages where he was advising her on how to transfer her funds out of the country, how to make everything look clean, how to avoid detection. They were planning her escape, and I was the one left holding the bag. It was sickening to see how deep this conspiracy went. I decided I needed to act quickly. I filed a motion to have her served with a court order to produce all financial records. I also pushed for a temporary restraining order to prevent her from selling or transferring any more assets. The judge granted it, and suddenly she was legally restricted from moving or hiding any more money. That was a huge win, but I knew Lisa wouldn't go down without a fight. She responded by playing the victim, crying, claiming I was trying to ruin her, that I was just jealous or controlling. She spun stories about how I'd always been insecure, how I never supported her ambitions. But I saw through her act. I knew she was desperate to keep her secrets hidden. I also started to gather witnesses, people who could testify to her manipulative behavior, her lies, her plans to run away with Mark and her hidden wealth. One day she confronted me directly. She begged for forgiveness, claiming she was under a lot of stress, that she never meant to hurt me, that it was all a mistake. She even accused me of being paranoid and said I'd driven her to this point. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her that I saw everything, her lies, her betrayal, her greed. I told her I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything we built. That was the last time she tried to manipulate me directly. As the court hearings approached, I felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. I knew this was going to get ugly. She'd be fighting to keep her money, and I was prepared to fight back hard. I realized I wasn't just fighting for the house or the savings. I was fighting to expose her true character, to make sure she paid for her lies, her betrayal, and her greed. Looking back now, I see how naive I was to trust her so blindly. I thought we had a future, a good life. But all along, she was planning her escape, using me as a pawn in her scheme. I've learned that sometimes the people you love the most can hurt you the deepest, and that if you want justice, you have to be willing to fight for it, no matter how ugly, how messy it gets. I don't know how this will end, but I do know one thing. I won't let her or Mark take everything without paying the price. I'm determined to see this through, to get back what's mine, and to rebuild from the wreckage she's left behind. Because in the end, betrayal like this teaches you who your real enemies are, and it teaches you to never, ever trust blindly again. The court date finally arrived, and I was ready. I had everything lined up, the evidence, the witnesses, the legal team. I knew Lisa would be pulling out all the stops to try and hide or transfer assets, but I was prepared. Sitting in that courtroom, I felt a strange mix of anger, relief, and exhaustion. All the pain, all the lies, it was coming to a head. I looked over at her, her face pale, her eyes darting around, knowing she was about to be exposed for what she truly was. The judge listened carefully as my lawyer laid out the case, evidence of the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the secret transfers. Then my witnesses took the stand, friends she'd manipulated, colleagues who knew about her schemes, even some of her own family members who confirmed her manipulative tendencies. It was brutal, but it was honest. We showed how she'd systematically planned to drain our assets and disappear, leaving me with nothing. Lisa's lawyer tried to argue her innocence, claiming she was the victim of a jealous husband, that she deserved a fresh start, that her financial dealings were personal and private. But the judge wasn't buying it. The evidence was overwhelming. The offshore accounts, the fake identities, the transfers, all of it painted a clear picture of a woman trying to run away with her wealth while leaving me in the dust. When the judge finally ruled, it was a moment I'll never forget. She ordered Lisa to turn over all hidden assets, including the offshore accounts, and awarded me a significant portion of the house and savings, enough to start rebuilding my life. The judge also ordered her to pay restitution for the financial damages caused by her deceit. I felt a weight lift, but I also knew the emotional scars wouldn't heal overnight. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt a strange sense of closure. I realized I'd been naive to think that love meant trust blindly. Betrayal like this is a brutal lesson, but it also makes you stronger. I learned that you have to be vigilant, that trusting someone blindly can cost you everything. And most of all, I learned that sometimes justice doesn't come easy. It takes fighting, patience, and a lot of resilience. Since then, I've been slowly rebuilding. The house is still ours, and I've managed to secure the savings that remain. I've started therapy to deal with the emotional fallout and to learn how to trust again, carefully this time. I've also cut out all the people who enabled her lies, and I've started surrounding myself with genuine friends and family who support me. Looking back, I see the whole nightmare as a harsh but necessary wake-up call. I trusted the wrong person, yes, but I also found my strength. I learned to stand up for myself, to fight for what's right, and to never let betrayal define me. Lisa's betrayal cost me a lot, but it also taught me invaluable lessons about trust, integrity, and resilience. The biggest takeaway: never assume someone's loyalty is guaranteed. People can surprise you in the worst ways, but no matter how deep the betrayal, you can come out on the other side. I did, and if I can do it, anyone can.